Hello everyone, this is Quentin Figueroa here with Crowd Freedom, and I wanted to talk to you about the costs of paying taxes in a government society versus just buying things directly in a free society through the free market. So I want to go through that with you and kind of give you an understanding of what we currently pay for in America and kind of how this could be replaced or done through a free market system. So this table right here shows the United States federal spending in 2015. The total spent was $3.8 trillion. And then you can see here it's broken down on a number of different services. And it totals out to 3.8 trillion. And so if we were to take if we were to take this 3.8 trillion and divide it out on each of these different items between 300 million people, then that's what's going to give this number right here, the per person tax amount. So this is obviously estimating on the high side because not 300 million people don't pay income taxes or that kind of thing. So it'd probably be more accurate to do it by like 150 million or something. But just to kind of give you an idea, I just wanted to kind of ballpark it by taking this number. So say for Social Security, you got 1.276 trillion. If you divide that by 300 million, you're going to get $4,253 per person. So that is how much the average person, or one in 300 million people, is paying per year of that 1.276 trillion in Social Security taxes. So yeah, so you can see here you got Social Security, 33% of the 3.8 trillion goes to Social Security. So that's the biggest government expense we have. The second biggest government expense, Medicare and health. That's 27%, and you can see it's 1.052 trillion, or about $3,500 per person. And then the third biggest expense is military, 16%, and it was $609.3 billion in 2015. And then the fourth biggest expense, which is really crazy, is the interest on debt, which is $229.2 billion, or $763 per person. And then the list goes on and on and on, which you can see here. So the question is, first of all, so this is federal spending, right? And then down here we got state and local spending, because we pay both state, local taxes as well as federal taxes in America. So then you also have it kind of broken down here. I did it for the state of California. It's obviously different in each state, but fairly similar. So this is kind of what we pay for government to provide right now. So let's start back up here with the federal spending and kind of go through this. So right here on Social Security, we're paying about $4,200 a year for that. And as I'm sure many of you are aware, that is highly unfunded, and whether or not people will actually get that is highly questionable and unlikely. So this is already a huge problem with the government. We're already spending lots of money on it. This $4,200 is not even close to funding what is needed for Social Security. So this 1.276 trillion, it's nowhere near what it actually is. So it's not even being funded properly to what it's outputting. But that's, I guess, a different topic. But it's just interesting how if we were to just take this $4,200 that we're paying a year, and if we were to put away $4,200 every year, instead of putting it into Social Security, after 30 years at 2% interest, we would have $173,793. So in a government system, you're going to have something like Social Security, where you can put your money into every year, about $4,200, and you're going to be left with very little, or these days you're not probably going to have anything, especially younger people. It's just going to be gone and depleted. But if you were instead to just put that in some simple 2% interest savings account or something like that, you would have $173,000, and it would not be eaten up by inflation and all these other things that we have thanks to government controlling money. So anyway, that's how you would handle that in a free market. And obviously, if you didn't want to put any money into savings, you wouldn't have to. So Medicare and healthcare, right? So we're spending about $1 trillion. It's about $3,500 per person. If we were to take that money and instead, so this is actually funny. So Medicare and health care, this $3,500 is going towards people who, it's different than the health insurance that we buy right now. Like when we go and get something, when we pay for health insurance, it's on top of this. So we pay this as like a base, but then if we actually want to get insurance, it's in addition to this $3,500. So you're going to be paying much more. But if instead of actually paying $3,500 and we just put that into our own health insurance policy, then you're going to have a really good health insurance policy. So why would we want to have this Medicare and healthcare provided by the government when we could just have our own private insurance that's going to be far, far, far superior than this? And yeah, of course, okay, there might be some poor people and we need to take care of them. But that type of thing can be done through charity. And it's done much more efficiently through free market charity than through some government bureaucratic communist program. So that's just kind of strange that, I mean, I guess all of these expenses are strange, but it's going to be way better if we're doing these types of things in the free market. Okay, so then if we go over to military, we're spending about $2,000 a person on the military to go and, you know, whatever the military does. But if you look here, if we were to spend roughly the same amount in the market, we'd be able to get a DRO type insurance policy, which would basically be like a defense agency or a agency that handles disputes and that kind of thing. How that would work is kind of discussed in the book and whatnot, and it varies and it's open to, you know, a number of different ways, but basically some type of service that acts similar to the military or to a police agency where you subscribe to them and they provide you protection and these kinds of things at a price. So it doesn't have to be done by the government. It could be done through the market, and it could be billed very similar to how your health insurance is billed. It would be billed on some type of insurance policy where you pay a monthly premium and they provide service. The premium would vary based on how much service you want, and of course, you wouldn't need to pay for it if you didn't want to have that. So that could easily, so these first three things can easily be provided by the free market, and anytime you do something in the free market, it's going to be cheaper and better than the government. So of course we'd want to do these things through the market system rather than through the governmental system. Now this next one, interest on debt. So right now we pay interest on debt for absolutely no reason other than the fact that we have the Federal Reserve and we use it to, for whatever reason, it's a complete mess. I'm sure most people who listen to these videos or read the book know that the Federal Reserve is probably the biggest problem in America. So we're paying interest on debt to destroy our economy, and we're paying $763 a year on it, or at least that's what we were paying in 2015. So we would not have interest on debt in a free society because we wouldn't have a Federal Reserve that loans money at interest to us, because that would be a stupid thing to do. And instead, if a bank did do that, we'd just use another bank or another currency or something like that. So of course there'd be no interest on debt in a free society. Veterans benefits, there would not be any veterans benefits in a free society because there probably would not be any veterans. Food and agriculture, so we would, I mean, why we even have agencies for this kind of stuff, I don't know. We could have private agencies that if we wanted to have them provide information or stuff like that about food, we could. I don't think most people have very many problems with figuring out what kind of food to eat. Education. So education right now in America is split between federal and state spending. We'll explore education kind of more at the state level, and same with transportation. So in these cases, there's going to be no federal education costs or federal transportation costs, housing and community, international affairs, energy. And so, I mean, this is all just typical waste that all of this could be done privately, would be done way better privately. And why are we spending money in the government to do things that they are going to do far inferior than the market? So of course, we're not going to pay for any of these things in a free society the way that we pay for them now. So anyway, just to give you an overview on this federal spending part, right? So per person, we are paying about $12,786. Obviously, this is very, very, very generous on what it really is. It's probably at least $20,000 per person because this is divided by 300 million people and not that many people are paying income taxes or the majority of taxes. But that is another topic. Here we have the per person cost is going to be about $9,700. So you're going to be under $10,000, which I guess you could say is similar or close to what we're paying with federal spending, but the service is going to be far superior and there's going to be much less waste and all of that kind of thing. But this is kind of how, this is what we're currently spending money on in the federal government, and this is how we could do the same exact thing in a free market system. Okay, so now we're moving on to California state and local spending in 2015, which was $486.8 billion. By the way, all of this data is sourced. If you were to click, this 2 or this 1 here. So if you were to actually go through, you would see the links for the sources right here. So if you care to look into that. So we got, these are the top expenses in California. So you got education, healthcare, other spending, pensions, protection, transportation, welfare, general government, and interest on debt. Okay, so if we were to check out here, education. So again, the same type of thing. You have the total amount that we're spending, and if you divide it by the population paying this tax, which is 39.1 million, which is roughly the population of California state. So if you divide that, the per person tax is going to be about $2,749 for education. So this is interesting, education, because education, everybody pays it, normally in the form of a property tax, but everybody pays for education even if they're not using it. Because in the States, in America, it's usually only younger people who are using education and schools and that kind of thing, yet people who don't have children or who are older still pay for it, which is completely ridiculous, and it makes no sense, but it makes sense in a government society where they do things that aren't as optimized or rational as a free market. So if you were to take education in a free market, it would be optional. So you might pay $0 if you choose not to educate yourself, or even if you educate yourself online, which is better than any government school, that's going to be $0. So you can educate yourself for free. But if you wanted to have a school with a teacher or go kind of more traditional route or whatever other route that the market takes, you could pay for it. And if you were to pay, roughly $2,500, you will get a far, far, far superior education than you would in a government bureaucratic communist school. So you are much better off with a free market school education. And I think we see that already with the internet taking over a lot of educational aspects, colleges and that kind of thing. So yeah, healthcare. So we have healthcare spending for state also in addition to federal. But since we've already covered this in the federal table and already have an insurance policy that is far superior than anything the government would provide, we would not be paying a state education or state healthcare fee or cost or anything because we've already paid for it right here for Medicare and that type of thing. So it would replace that anyway. So there's no healthcare costs for this one. Other spending, which I would assume is bureaucrats somehow finding ways to fleece the people and make extra money. We would not be paying for that. Pensions, which are completely unfunded, and this number is far less than what it obviously really is. Pensions, we would not have pensions because, companies could have pensions if they wanted to, but companies would pay that. You wouldn't pay it for yourself. A pension would just be you paying for your own retirement or anything like that. It's why we have government pensions is absolutely ridiculous, and that's crazy. Okay, protection. So again, this comes into like police and military and that kind of thing. This one probably has the widest range of costs and what it could be. So we covered it in the federal table, talking about the DROs. And this could be zero, but it could be a lot more. It could be 5,000. Who knows what you would pay? But no matter what, if you were to match what we're paying right now for government, you're going to get way more bang for your buck. So whether you have, anyway, this costs, who knows? Because you have kind of both of these two that are the same thing. It'd be handled through a DRO, but it's going to be cheaper than it would be in a state governmental society transportation. Okay, so right now we're paying about $1,000 in California for state transportation, but you also have this federal transportation cost as well, which who knows what that's for. Okay, so in a free society, roads may or may not have fees, but it will probably be similar to how internet is paid for, because if you think about it, roads are very, very similar to the internet. You have ISPs, internet service providers, that provide you roads for your computer. They let information go from one point to another, and that's what roads do for people. So roads and the internet are very similar. So I would imagine the billing and that type of thing would possibly be similar. It might be different, it may not. Roads may be free. I talk about this in the book and stuff. It's possible that roads could have it to where different businesses, which within the proximity of certain roads, could all pitch in and build those roads, because they need roads to get people to come to their stores or to their houses or that kind of thing. So it could be something that the actual businesses themselves pay for rather than the consumer, or it could be something that the consumer pays for, especially on more kind of rural locations and roads that are out in the middle of nowhere and that kind of thing. So it just depends. But that, let's say if we're spending like $1,000 in California, I'm sure for $1,000 we could get something far superior, 1,000 per person, right? So anyway, that is roads. Welfare. Unfortunately, there will not be a state welfare system that exploits people and keeps them poor and keeps them from attaining higher wages and keeps them from working and keeps them from educating themselves. So you're not going to have this welfare system that's hurting people and making people slaves. Instead, you're going to have charity and things like this that are going to be much better. And you could or could not pay for it. It's completely up to you. There's going to be less poor people in a free society in general anyway, because people are going to be more intelligent, because less intelligent people and poor people aren't going to want to live there. Okay? General government, so more government fleecing taxpayers of their money. You're not going to have any of that. And you're not going to have interest on debt of central banks taking people's money. So yeah, that is kind of give you an idea of what we are currently spending money on and kind of how it could be done much better in a free market situation. So you can see here, per person in California, you're spending about $12,448. And in a free market society, it might be around $1,000 to $3,500. So if we were to total all this up, United States federal plus California plus local spending, you'll see that it's $4.2868 trillion, which is about, for a person living in California, that'd be about $25,000 a year that they're paying. Or you could go the free market route and pay like $13,200, and you're going to get much, much better service for about half the price. And why on earth would we not want to do that? It makes no sense. So let's also look at one other thing. So I know people are probably thinking California has high taxes, because it does. But if you look at and compare it to most other states, it's not that much different. So this is the amount of taxes spent and the total population and what the per person tax would be, right? So in California, which we already went through, you're looking at about $12,448 per person a year. And that's with, the population of 39.1 million. So if you look at Alaska, there's the spending, the population, they'd be paying about $24,000 per person. Arizona, they spent $53.1 billion in 2015. They have 6.8 million people, so that's $7,800 per person. Florida, $7,700. Ohio, $9,800 per person. Montana, $9,600. And you can see, yeah, California is, I guess, kind of high, but not really. They're all paying, the lowest one here is Nevada, right? 6,600. The highest is Alaska at 2,400. New York, which you would expect to be high, is 15,000, 12,000 at California. I mean, they're all within, they're all similar. They're not, you don't see one that's like 100 times more, 100 times less. They're all within 1 or 2 times of each other. So it's all the same stuff, Let's look at the federal tax revenue real quick. So this is where the government brings in revenue. So you have individual income taxes is the largest revenue source for the federal government. With people volunteering to pay income taxes, they generate 1.48 trillion in 2015. So that's almost half of total revenue. You have payroll taxes, which are taxes that are paid by the corporation for the employee, which is 1.07 trillion. And then you have corporate income taxes, which is 341.7 billion. So these three, basically all these income taxes, business taxes, basically take account for like the entire revenue for the federal government. And then it's funny, excise taxes, which is what most people would say is legitimate, where you basically pay fees when you buy things. This is only 3% of the total revenue that the government generates. Even miscellaneous is higher than that, which is kind of weird. So these are the ways that the government generates revenue. And in a free society, you would not pay taxes. You would pay fees for things. So rather than putting all your money together in the form of taxes to pay for a service that only some people need, you would just directly pay for what you want. So that's kind of what I showed here. So rather than everybody paying a part of their check for Social Security, you would keep all your money and you would choose whether or not you want to put away money for whatever Social Security provides. If you wanted to have health insurance, rather than being forced to pay for it, you would just choose to have your own health insurance if you needed it. If you even needed insurance, who even knows what the cost would be on health, on medical expenses, because in a free society, you wouldn't have insurance companies subsidizing the whole thing through government and having a complete mess of high prices and insurance. Instead, you would just have people paying for things really, really, really cheap, because competition in a free market would make things cheap. It is absolutely crazy how a pill can cost thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars for these medications and things, when a CD, which is pretty much the same thing, is super cheap. It's information. Information is cheap and it doesn't cost a lot of money to make. And with competition, nobody's going to be able to have a monopoly on information. So healthcare costs are going to go really, 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 really cheap in a free society when you don't have the government keeping businesses from being legally allowed to do so. But anyway, yeah, I just wanted to make this to show you how anything we're doing right now with the government can be done in a free society much better. So why would we want to do a government society when we could have much better society through the free market without violence? So if you like this video, please subscribe and be sure to check out the book. This chart right here is taken straight from the book, crowdfreedom.com/book. So you could go read this right now and go through the whole book. And I hope you do. So yeah, share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, comment, like the video, and I will continue making more videos. So have a great day, everyone. Okay, one other thing I have to cover in this is that all this government spending that I've shown in here this is just the tip of the iceberg. So there's 3.8 trillion spent, right? So if we actually go down here and we look at kind of the revenue and the spending, the revenue is always less than the spending. So, you can see here every year how much they bring in and how much the government spends. This is at the federal level. So there's always a deficit, right? 400 billion, almost 700 billion, 1 trillion, 1.2 trillion, 1. So you see all this negative difference every year, which is why we have a national debt of about $20 trillion, right? Because we keep accumulating a deficit. So then, so we have a national debt that's now over $19 trillion. We also have over 100 trillion in unfunded liabilities. And that is for government, that is for things that need to be paid by the government in the future that are currently not funded, like pensions, Social Security, Medicare, these kind of things. All of these promises to pay people and government employees and that kind of thing in the future that are not funded right now. And how are they going to be funded? That is a tough question because, as you can see, the revenue here just isn't where it needs to be to make up for like over $100 trillion of costs. So that is a big problem, and it's something to understand of why a government system is so bad and dangerous. Because the average US citizen, they earn about $50,000 per year. This is me being generous because it's actually less than that. The average US citizen pays then $18,000 to $35,000 in taxes per year, depending on the state they live in. So the average US citizen is paying 36 to 70% of their income in taxes to the federal and state governments. But this is just taxes. We also have the whole aspect of inflation. And most things are paid through inflation, which you don't see in any of this government data. Inflation is when they just print the money they need, because obviously they don't have enough money through these tax revenues. So the biggest tax they have is just inflation. They just print the money, they loan the money to themselves through the Federal Reserve, and then this allows them to pay for what they need to pay for. So this is something that also isn't as clear with this data, and it's kind of misleading because if you just look at all this data, you kind of think, okay, yeah, maybe it kind of makes sense, but it's actually way, way, way worse than it looks, especially when you consider inflation and things like this. So when we look at all this, we look at the approximately 120 trillion in unfunded liabilities and national debt, right? So this is the current credit card debt on the government. And the average US citizen then, if we divide it by 300 million people, which is still grossly overestimated, but anyway, they owe approximately 400,000 to the government. So when we're looking at something like this, kind of like looking at kind of what the expenses would be and whatnot, we have to also consider that on top of paying this every year, you're also getting, so this is the total one with everything. So on top of paying, like 25,000 or so a year, you also have inflation, which is making you poorer because it's extracting your wealth and it's destroying your purchasing power. That is kind of another topic, but people, which I'm sure most people watching this understand the Federal Reserve and that kind of thing, and how it extracts your wealth and how it makes us poorer. Things become more expensive, and in general, you're just poorer, and it's a terrible thing. So you don't see kind of the inflation thing, which is these numbers. This is just the tax side of things. The inflation thing is actually much, much worse in the way that the value of our dollar has lost tons of money, and that's why the price of gold has gone up, because it takes more dollars that are worth less to buy gold, which stays the same in price. It's just relative to dollars, gold is worth more now. So we have this whole inflation piece, which government absolutely destroys the standard of living of people by charging people, by making things more expensive because of the way their currency works. And then on top of all of this, we already have a $400,000 bill per person just at the start. So we're paying $25,000 a year in taxes, roughly. We have inflation, which is eating us at like 10 to 15%, is what people like John Williams and stuff would say, who understand this much more and who more accurate than the government, who says it's like 1 or 2%. Inflation is really like 10 to 15% a year. So you have that extracting your wealth. And then from the get-go, you're at $400,000 in the hole that you need to pay from the start to be a US citizen. So it's absolutely ludicrous and ridiculous. And just showing these two numbers isn't doing enough justice as to how detrimental and how bad a government society really is for maintaining your purchasing power and actually buying things. So not just paying $25,000 a year, you're actually paying $400,000 plus $25,000 a year, and you're getting your purchasing power destroyed for lower quality services with a higher price tag. So why on earth would we want to do this? It makes no sense, and there's no rational argument for it. So this is why I think a free society is so important, because a government society is so hurtful to people, and it's the biggest thing that's hurting people in this day and age, in my humble opinion. So I wanted to add that to this video. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.